Hello and welcome to English Literature with Susan. Today I want to talk about sonnet, its introduction into English language, and it will be followed by reading of two sonnets representing each sonnet format in English language. And if you find the PowerPoint template interesting, I have downloaded it from slidesgo.com. So let us go to our topic, sonnet and its patterns in English language. Of course, I will first introduce sonnet as a historical genre, the prominence of sonnet in the history of literature in general, and then I will go through two sonnets by Petrarch, actually translated by Sir Thomas Wyatt, and then I will go to Shakespeare's famous sonnet 1918. Sonnet number 18. Well, this is a general definition of the term sonnet. It is defined as a lyric poem. Let me read it once and then I will add some explanations and details about each part of this definition. A lyric poem consisting of a single stanza of 14 iambic pentameter lines linked by an intricate rhyme scheme. Well, what is a lyric poem? A lyric poem is a poem written mostly to be accompanied by music or musical instruments, so it has some musicality or some sonorous element with it. And also the lyrical poems are personal and private, so whether it is spoken by the figure of the poet himself or herself, or it is representing a persona or a speaker, that persona is talking about his or her feelings or states of the mind or thoughts. So it's a kind of private, personal kind of a poem. A lyric poem, therefore, is sonnet consisting of a single stanza of 14 lines, let's say. So the number of the lines or the format of a sonnet is limited to 14 lines, and most of the cases it is so, unless there are some examples, which go contradictory to this definition, or they are anti-conventional anyway. But the convention of a sonnet emphasizes a 14-line poem of a single stanza. Of course, there are some divisions in that stanza based on the thematic patterns. And the metrical pattern of a sonnet in English language is iambic pentameter, which actually the dominant or the staple or the most significant metrical pattern in English language, linked by intricate rhyme scheme. The rhyme scheme makes all the difference. So whether we have, the English sonnet or Italian sonnet, the difference mostly is about the rhyme scheme and the two different musical energies or powers or capacities of the two languages, Italian and English. Why I'm talking about Italian language? Because sonnet was originally written in Italian. The first sonnets, maybe, from the very beginning, we have to go to Provençal kind of songs in France. There were a group of troubadours. The troubadours sung a poem, and then in a musical way, and they performed it. So there was such an origin, and then it was kind of transmitted or translated into Italian language. And at the time of the Renaissance, in which we have the issue of the dominance of vernacular over Latin, some Italian poets decided to write in Italian rather than in Latin. And it started in Sicilia, and then it was kind of transferred to Tuscany. And Petrarch was a figure who wrote maybe the most famous or the earliest version of a sonnet sequence, which is called canzoniere. Canzoniere is actually referring to the sonnet sequence or the number of sonnets, which is 317, written to a beloved called Laura. It is written in the coarsely tradition, so the language is sometimes bombastic and very elegant. By the way, Kansan, the very term Kansan means roughly street song. So instead of Engaging himself with Latin forms of poetry, Petrarch chose to write in Italian, which was the language spoken really by the people on the streets. So the tradition of the sonnet started, and sonnet is unique in the history of literature of the world because of its expanse, geographical expanse, and also its kind of life. A sonnet is still alive for about, at least in English language, 500 years. First, it was translated, Petrarch's sonnets were translated into French and Portuguese, for example, later on into English. And then even his sonnets found their way to what is now Poland. And in Slavic languages, they also start to write sonnets, these, kind of short form of a poem. And from then on, sonnet exists. And I told you about the metrical pattern, which is iambic pentameter. I'm going to explain it in detail, but for the time being, we know that this is the staple or dominant metrical pattern in English language. And about the rhyme scheme, we would also discuss in detail. So this was the background. This was, the history of sonnet. And sonnet was for the first time translated into English language by two figures, almost synchronously at the same time, by Sir Thomas Wyatt and the Earl of Surrey, who is also called, his original name is Henry Howard. About the metrical pattern, iambic pentameter. Penta means five. It has some Greco-Latin, origins. And what is an iamb? And therefore, what is the adjective iambic? Iambic foot, the noun is iamb, is consisted of an unstressed syllable which is followed by a stressed syllable. So the combination of unstressed, stressed means or makes an iambic foot. And when we say iambic pentameter, we mean that there are five such feet. So unstressed, stressed, unstressed, stressed, unstressed, stressed, unstressed, stressed, unstressed, stressed. This is like the heartbeat, for example. So um, iambic pentameter is defined as the combination of five iambic feet. The line is hence composed of 10 syllables. In order to have 10 actually, unstressed, stressed combinations, we need 10 syllables, which are actually juxtaposed like this, in an alternate way. Unstressed, stressed, unstressed, stressed. Notice this example. The curfew tolls the knell of parting day. This is a very obvious and good example. Just check, words such as there, or the second part of two syllable words, the unstressed part of two syllable words, do not, take this stress in them when we just read a sentence. So the curfew tolls the knell of parting day. This is just pronounced like this, though we don't exaggerate when we read a poem or a line, but actually the pattern is like that. So we have unstressed followed by unstressed, and this is the marker, the sign through which we show unstressed food, the unstressed part of a food, and this one is the stressed part of it. Unstressed, stressed, unstressed, stressed, unstressed, unstressed, and stressed. You see here we have five pairs like this, and each one of them is called an iambic foot, and the combination of these five iambic feet is called iambic pentameter. I told you penta refers to five. And why iambic pentameter is the dominant metrical pattern in English language? There are various reasons for that, but the most important maybe is that in English, in spoken English, we also speak like this. This is like the everyday English. In everyday English, we have the same pattern, and it is like that. That kind of like let's say this pattern up, down, up, down, or It is like heartbeat. If you listen to your heartbeat or listen to records made out of heartbeats, you can listen this. You can see that there is one big voice or big sound, and then there's a smaller one, and this is repeated like this. We can listen to. Oh, oh, let me just bring it to front. Okay. So this is how we speak, or maybe it is because of this that iambic is used in English language, or maybe it is because it matches or it syncs with the heart pulse of us. So in English language, it is the most dominant. For example, when sonnet was translated into French, it was written in iambic hexameter, which is technically called an Alexandrine. So in each language, a dominant metrical pattern is used, and this is just a brief introduction to what is iambic pentameter. And about the two patterns or the two rhyme patterns of sonnet in English, there are two major patterns of rhyme in sonnets written in English language, and that is how we divide Italian or Petrarchan sonnet and English or Shakespearean sonnet. Italian or Petrarchan because it was anyway translated from Petrarch, or Petrarch was the first person writing sonnet in this manner. It is called English or sometimes Shakespearean because the form is perfected in William Shakespeare's sonnet sequence. A combination of sonnets, by the way, is technically speaking called a sonnet sequence. Uh, well, the Italian pattern was for the first time introduced into English by Sir Thomas Wyatt, and the English pattern was introduced not by Shakespeare but by Henry Howard. Shakespeare imitated or followed Henry Howard's pattern and perfected it, therefore, it is called Shakespeare because we can see the best representation Shakespeare's sonnet sequence. It is called Shakespearean, but actually, it was Earl of Surrey who, for the first time, translated sonnets in this way. And why we move from Italian sonnet to English sonnet in English language? Because of two reasons. First of all, Italian is a very musical and sonorous language. It is full of sounds and different forms of musicalities, while English is not like that. One reason is that Italian is of Latin roots, while English is of Germanic roots. And in Latin, we can have different forms of the same nucleus or, original word. For example, we have nature and then we have natural, naturally, for example. But English doesn't have this capability like other forms of Germanic languages. And there is one other reason as well. In Italian, we could find many words. So the domain of the words in Italian language was much, much, much more greater than the domain of the words in English language because Italian language was an old language while English language is a quite new language among the languages of the world. So there were not many words in English language, and the English were actually forced to kind of find a compatible mode of writing sonnets which has less rhyming words. First of all, let's go to Italian sonnet and to see what is the form of it. I told you the sonnet is written in a form of a singular stanza, 14 lines, but there are thematic divisions. An Italian sonnet has two parts. The first part has 8 lines, and the second part has 6 lines. The 8 line part is called octave or an octave. Octave is related to the number 8. And the part which has 6 lines is called the sestet. Sestet also refers to the number 6. And this is the rhyme pattern of the octave. In the octave, we have 4 words rhyming with one another. A. You can see in lines 1, 4, 5, and 8. And then in lines 2, 3, 6, and 7, we can see B. So we have 4 rhyming words like this, and we have 4 rhyming words like this. And in English language, it is very difficult to find no 4 rhyming words. That's why English modified the original form of a sonnet. The rhyme scheme of the sestet might vary, but one of the dominant systems is CDE CDE. Sometimes it can be CDE CDE or CDE DCE. So it varies, but by the way, it includes at least two pairs of rhyming words. And I talked about the thematic differences between an octave and a sestet. In the octave, the problem, the issue, the question as posed, and in the sestet, we find the resolution or the answer to that problem or issue. So at the first part, we don't know what's up, we just hear the condition. And in the second part, we listen to the poet explaining the reason of the issue which had happened, like what we will read by Petrarch, translated by Wyatt later. And about English sonnet or Shakespearean sonnet, the 14 lines are there, but the divisions are rather different. 1, 2, 3, 4. That's it. We have a break, and then 1, 2, 3, 4. Another break. 1, 2, 3, 4. Another break. 1, 2. The last part. Each four line stanzas in English language are called quatrains. So we have three quatrains or three divisions of 4 lines, and then a final concluding couplet. We have heard about the word couple, for example. Couple means a phenomenon made out of two. So couplet means the combination of 2 lines. And about the rhyme scheme, these are divided based on the rhyme scheme they have. The first quatrain's rhyme scheme is like this: A B A B. So two words or two pairs of words are just rhyming. The second part, a new system of rhyming is introduced, CD/CD. So, uh, uh, speaking from the angle point or based on the rhyme scheme, this part has nothing to do with the second part. And the third part is also introducing a new form of rhyme scheme, EF, two other words or two other musicalities. And finally, the couplet, and the 2 lines in a couplet are rhyming with one another. So they end with words which are musically or sonorously similar to one another. And the topic is extended, the subject matter of the poem is extended from the beginning till line 12. And in the last part, we have a very quick and sharp conclusion in which the main points or the main idea of the poem is summarized. Um, Now I'm going to read I Find No Peace, but I prefer to explain about the historical changes happening to the subject matter of a sonnet. Though the forms are almost these two ones, and after Shakespeare, many of the sonnets were written in the Petrarchan tradition of it, though Shakespearean sonnet has its own life as well. By the way, the subject matter of sonnets, because of Petrarch's canzoniers and the devotion of those poems to Laura, was love. And after Petrarch, every time a poet wanted to write a short poem about love, sonnet was the form. But later on, sonnet was adapted to other subject matters as well. For example, John Donne wrote holy sonnets and involving the love of God instead of the love of a woman, and has holy or divine sonnets. Or at the time of the Civil War, Milton wrote sonnets which had some political themes and motifs in them. And later on, in 19th century, the Romantic poets wrote sonnets about many topics, including some abstractions or some generalities like London, for example, or England. And in the late 19th century and 20th century, we can find sonnets with different topics. So love is no more today the subject matter of sonnets. I Find No Peace is written by Petrarch and translated by Sir Thomas Wyatt into English. And we are going to read this poem now. It is translated no loyally to what Petrarch had written, so it has an octave, a sestet, and about the rhyme scheme, the poet did his best, the translator did his best to remain faithful to Petrarch, though sometimes the limitations of English language had stopped him from doing so. I find no peace and all my boroughs done. The line is rather somehow, let's say, uh, we can say paradoxical. You can, if you have done all your wars, you have to find peace as well. But this doesn't happen here. I fear and hope. I burn and freeze like eyes. Well, yeah, having both feelings of fear and hope, but he doesn't mention why I am so. So here he's just introducing the subject. I burn and freeze like ice. And as someone who is in love would understand this, that you have like a fever, something like a fever, but at the same time, you're burning. You feel relieved. I fly above the wind, yet I cannot arise. This statement is also a paradoxical statement because either you fly or you're on earth, but this figure experiences both of them at the same time. And not I have nothing, and all the world I see is on, but I have also the whole world at my hand. And then he talks about the beloved hath loseth nor locketh, holdeth me in prison. Okay, I'm not locked. I can fly. I can just escape, um but I don't. The door of the prison is open, but I don't go out. And holdeth me not yet. Can I escape no wise? I don't wish to escape. I have no intentions of doing so. Nor letteth me live nor die at my device. No, I have no control over my life and death. No, I have given my life to someone else, and yet of death it giveth me occasion. And you see the repetition of the pronoun it, for example, instead of mentioning love, he tries to describe, to depict the condition. And then we move to the sestet. We see the explanation for this condition. Without I and I see, again, a kind of paradoxical statement. And without tongue I plain. Plain here means complain. I desire to perish, and yet I ask health, and I love another, and thus I hate myself. At the end, he just explains what's up. What is the problem? I love someone else, so I'm angry because I've lost myself. I fade me in sorrow because of that, and laugh in all my pain because of my love. So I'm sorry that I've lost myself, but I'm happy that I have found another one. Likewise, this pleaseth me both death and life, and my delight as causer of this strife. So this paradoxical condition had come into life because the poet, the persona, the speaker of the poem is in love, and then the condition of loving someone and the result of that is explained respectively in the octave and the sestet of this poem. Right? And let me, before going to Shakespeare's poem, explain paradox. What is because I repetitively talked about paradoxical statements in these poems. Paradoxes are statements which seem meaningless or contradictory when we read them, but when we think about them, we find them interpretable or meaningful. So at first you say, what does it mean? I burn and freeze. You cannot burn and freeze at the same time. But when you refer to your human condition, to your human experiences, you can identify with the same feeling. That's it. An example is taken from one of John Donne's holy sonnets. One short sleep past we wake eternally, and death shall be no more. Death, thou shalt die. Something essentially death cannot die. But when we think about it and when we look at it from the religious point of view, we know that there is an afterlife, and in afterlife it is promised that there wouldn't be any mortality, so it is an eternal kind of life, so death would die. So we need to think about a paradoxical statement before interpret it in our minds. And a very specific type of paradox also used in this poem is oxymoron. An oxymoron is itself a paradoxical statement. So, in order to have an oxymoron, we need first to have a paradox. But what type of a paradoxical statement is an oxymoron? A paradoxical utterance that conjoins two terms that in ordinary usage are contraries, like burn and freeze, life and death. We read in the poem. If we have a paradoxical statement in which two words which are in ordinary usage, each other's contraries, are used, we have also, technically speaking, an oxymoron. So the paradox is a paradox, and each oxymoron is, of course, a paradoxical statement, but with something different in it, with an addition, two contrary words. Or an example would be like this: oh, death and life, the days that are no more, taken from Alfred Lord Tennyson's Tears, Idle Tears. Death in life. Death cannot happen in life. But when you think about it, well, it does make sense. And death and life are in ordinary usage of English language, each other's contradictories, or statements such as loving hate or pleasing pain represent such types of paradoxical statements with an oxymoron in them. Now, let us move to the English version of a sonnet written by Shakespeare. The most famous sonnet may be written by William Shakespeare, which is sonnet number 18. And the elements are all considered. For example, you can see day and May here are rhyming, and temperate and date are also rhyming with one another. Or if we just check the number of the syllables, shall I compare thee to a summer's day? Shall as is actually a word used to question. So most of the times it doesn't take the stress. Shall I is the subject. Compare thee is the object. So compare again, you see, compare as a word with two syllables, as considered for the second word. Compare to a summer's day. So and because in English language, the intonation of a sentence with a question mark is rising. Shall I compare it to a summer's day? It is just read like this. So and everything is just considered. So unstressed, stress, unstressed, stressed, unstressed. Sorry, unstressed, stressed, unstressed, stressed, unstressed summer. Summer is no stress comes here. Summer's day, unstressed, stressed, and this pattern is followed in the rest of the poem. But let us go to the poem itself. Shall I compare thee to a summer's day? So, shall I compare you to an element of nature? Why a summer's day? For two reasons. First of all, because of the temperature of a summer's day, which is hot, and also because of the beauties of the flowers that are flourishing at summer. Shall I compare it to a summer's day? And it is, of course, a rhetorical question. A rhetorical a question means a question, which is asked, but the answer is already obvious. Shall I compare it to a summer's day? The answer is no, I cannot. Why? And we cannot read this, I can't, but the rest of the poem tells us this. Thou art, because thou art more lovely and more temperate. You're both more beautiful than summer, and also your actually heat is different. You're warm more than a summer's day. Thou art more lovely and more temperate. And then he explains why. Because the seasons are passing. So the seasonal cycle, forces each season to be short and passing, while this woman or this beloved's beauty is eternal. Rough winds do shake the darling buds of May. You have, of course, heard expressions such as the lily of the day or the flower in May. So the point is that the life of a flower in a summer day is short because autumn would come. Rough winds do shake the darling buds of May, and summer's lease means contract, and summer's lease hath all too surely date. So one day, the contract of summer would end, and it would be replaced by autumn. So we cannot rely on summer. Summer's passing, but you're eternal. You're immortal. And then in the rest of the poem, he explains why the beloved is immortal. Sometimes, but he still, for the time being, dwells on the differences between summer and its mortality or passage, and the beloved's immortality and eternality. Sometimes too hot the eye of heaven shines, and often is his gold complexion dimmed. So the sun is not balanced. Sometimes it is too hot. Sometimes it is not there at all. While you're a balanced one, your complexion, your color is always in there. It's always just shining. So your complexion is even more beautiful than the sun itself. And every fair from fair sometimes declines. Every beautiful person would get old one day, but your beauty is eternalized. It is perpetual, and any fear from fear sometime declines by chance or nature's changing course untrimmed. So sometimes because of the incidents of life, sometimes because of the course of nature. We're getting older every day, every minute, every second. So we cannot stop that. But I have found a way through which you would never get old. This is the point of the poet. But thy eternal summer shall not fade. So you're all the time the summer you're hot, you're beautiful, nor lose possession of that fair thou owest. You're not supposed to lose your beauty, nor shall death brag thou wanderest in his shade. Never death can show off that it had killed you. So you're not subject to death and its consequences. When an eternal lines to time thou growest. Why? Because I have eternalized you in my poems, in my lines. And so not only you're not dead, but also you're growing. You have a life in my poetry. And then that concluding couplet, so long as man can breathe or eyes can see, it means that so long that men can read, that human beings can read and their eyes can see. So they read aloud or they can see with their eyes. As long as human beings are living and they can read, you are alive. So long lives this is the poem. So long this so long lives this poem, and this poem gives life to thee. So as long as this poem is alive, you are also alive. And well, thank you very much for listening. This was my explanation of sonnet and reading of two different examples of the rhyming patterns of